Yeah, you guys say hello as you hop on. She's here.
Hello.
So, oh my gosh, I love you so much. I'm happy to be here with you. Um, so Stephanie and I were connecting a little bit before we hopped on this live, and we're both feeling very similarly today, kind of like a stick in the mud. Who's getting kicked a little bit. And so I thought it would be really powerful for us to begin this conversation with a question actually that I learned from you, which is, you want to tell everyone what it is?
Yes, this question comes from Jean Shinoda Bolin in her brilliant book, The Millionth Circle, and it is, how am I really? So, Lulu, how are
I
you
go
really?
first.
Yeah. How are you really?
How am I really? I am, I feel a lot of amplified emotion. I feel something that it sounds like anger but isn't. I feel like fire. I feel like hormonal fire, like a little irritable, a little frustrated. Things are not really going my way today. So I'm like, things are like breaking down. Or I went to the chiropractor, and I'm usually there for like 20 minutes. I was there for an hour, and I was just like, ugh. And, it's strange because not 12 hours ago, I was literally crying from gratitude, like just so grateful last night when I went to bed, just feeling so much alignment. So I'm on the roller coaster. How are you really?
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing and being real. It's really easy to gloss over and say, I'm
Okay, like that.
fine, I'm good. I also want to just say hi to Linda. Linda, it's so good to see you. Linda and I share a birthday, by the way. So
Sag.
yeah, we're sisters in that way. How am I really? I have also been feeling kind of like a little lower energy, just physically, I've been dealing with a lot. I've talked about that a bit online, just healing from some gut issues and some autoimmune stuff that's coming up as a result of that. I've been dealing with a lot of skin issues as linked to my gut health, and all of this has been as a result of traveling. And those of you that know me know how much I love to travel. It's part of my, like, one of my greatest passions. It's also part of, what I do for my work is, leading retreats and traveling with people and groups. And somewhere along the line, I've picked up a couple of parasites. So I'm like laughing now, but it's been not fun at all. And it's been a really long process to clear like different layers of gut infection. So I've been really in sort of the thick of that. And consequently, around the full and the new moon, parasites kind of act up. So I'm not sleeping very well. Um, but I also feel really grateful to have this time and space to focus primarily on healing these issues, because if this were any other year without the current global conditions, I would be traveling. I would be still doing a lot out of the state and out of the country, and that probably wouldn't, I'm realizing now, as much as I've resisted it in the beginning, how that really wouldn't have been the most optimal condition for me to do the level of physical healing that I've needed to. And so that's been really up in my experience, but also just the emotional clearing that happens for me, when I'm healing the physical. They're so interconnected to me. So
Yes.
I've been having, interesting sleep patterns and like,
Yes.
I'm just kind of like, what the hell? Like, do I even have a schedule anymore? I mean, I do, and I'm doing things, but it's not the way that my mind would like things to go, so I've had to surrender a lot and be more in the flow of, what my body is sort of dictating right now, what my energy levels are dictating,
Yes.
and navigating that within the sort of structure and confines of my day-to-day work. So that's a little bit where I am.
Yeah.
A picture.
I resonate so deeply with that, like kind of being ruled by the body right now. I was actually thinking about that when I was driving back to, hop on this call with you, which was essentially like the intuition in my body is so loud right now that there's no like maybe, there's no in the middle. I chose a week ago to stop drinking alcohol, to get off coffee, because my body was so loud about it. Like I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't feeling rested. I felt like my nervous system was so far out of whack. Like there are so many, things I can point to, and none of them are singular. Like it's a combination of so many different things. And I've been healing really, really deep ancestral trauma. And, something that came through on Sunday, so the day after the solstice, I participated in a grief ceremony, which I don't know if you've ever heard about this. I had never heard about a grief ceremony. Kind of powerful that it was on Father's Day. And I thought like, oh, I'm just probably gonna, grieve about my father. And no, it was not the grief that wanted to come up that day. And I've been grieving a lot of things from my great grandmother and my grandmother. And I had a beautiful release, and what became very clear to me, like you can see the emotion still very much on the surface, is what a privilege it is to be able to grieve. Like what a privilege it is to have the opportunity, like just like you shared, to be able to heal and mend and take time for yourself. Like there are so many that do not have that privilege. And the women in my lineage were two of those women. They did not have the ability to grieve, to heal, to mend, to return to themselves the way that I do. And I can't help but feel gratitude for that, alongside feeling frustration, alongside feeling confused about the enormity of what I'm experiencing and how none of it happened to me.
Yeah.
But I've been feeling it for years. Years.
Yeah.
But yeah, what a privilege.
Yeah. I know it doesn't always feel like it. It doesn't always feel like it. And I think that's an interesting part of this time period in history, particularly like with global unfoldings, we'll say, as the global situation kind of unfolds.
Conversations.
Yeah, like so much is coming up for people, and a lot of women that I would talk to, my clients, etc., would say like I just feel guilty, like I'm just having so much emotion, I'm grieving so much, I'm like there's so much emotion present, and I feel like it's inhibiting my productivity or whatever. And it's like part of the privilege of grieving is actually taking the space to clear what's coming up. It's not just for us. Like sometimes it can feel self-indulgent, I think, but particularly like what we're beginning to understand more about epigenetics and, just what you mentioned about your great grandmother and your grandmother, like you are clearing for your lineage. We are clearing as a collective. And so if we have the opportunity to really grieve, to cry, to release the emotion fully, it isn't just about us. Like some people, like you said, don't have the opportunity to really go to that place. I mean, if you take the sort of experience with COVID, like the last few months, you know, nurses on the front line, doctors on the front lines were not really able to, they were in survival mode. You know, they're in that adrenaline response of meeting the moment and handling, you know, what's in front of them. Whereas the rest of us perhaps are feeling even more so. And that, in my interpretation, is like, you know, with that, like, we are so sensitive. So many of us we're all empathic beings. Some of us more sensitive than others. And when we feel that, we have a tendency to feel what other people are feeling. So, you know, at this time, we are really, really being called to clear for one another. I mean, obviously from a sovereign place, to the best of our ability, there's so many layers of this, but, you know, it takes a village. We're helping one another out, I think, in a lot of ways. And I think sometimes when it really comes to the ancestral and lineage stuff, at least in my own experience, and that's really all I can speak from, sometimes the greatest acknowledgement that we can give is just recognizing the privileges that we have, the gifts that we have now that our ancestors didn't, and really honoring them for the journey. Like, we are the dreams of our ancestors. I don't know who said that originally, but we are the dreams of our grandmothers. Like, our grandmothers, as my mentor Nisha Moodley always says, our grandmothers conspired for these moments when we can use our voices, when we have more freedom as women in particular. You know, it's a really important time. And yeah,
those words still give me chills.
There's so much there. Yeah.
Those words, we are the dreams of our ancestors. Like, that still gives me chills and is still very moving and a deep, deep part of me. And, you know, what's interesting around, I think, being an empath or being empathic, feeling things that aren't yours, I feel this kind of tie with self-doubt, which is something that came up for us very strongly in a circle that we hosted on the solstice, a Saturday. It's like every single woman wrote down self-doubt as like something they wanted to let go of. And I guess I would love for us both to share really what we do, but I would love to hear like how you navigate self-doubt. Like, what's your like go-to, you know, because we all have these, hopefully we learn these tools, and like some days the first tool works and other days all 27 just like shit in the wind. You know, nothing's working. Like, I tried to put on an aromatherapy today for focus and it just exploded all over my hands, and I don't like the way it smells. It's like it's got patchouli in it, and I'm just like, of course this happened. So what are your go-tos when like doubt comes, you know, and it's specific around self-doubt?
Yeah, so first of all, I think recognizing that you're not alone. You know, everyone experiences self-doubt, but for me, often it's catching myself when I'm in the spiral of it. Like, sometimes for me that takes a minute. I'm like, oh, here I am again, you know. So there's a level of presence that that is required to understand that that's what's in operation. And sort of what we talked about on the solstice with our group, you know, this self-doubt, I believe, is part of one of the functions of our ego that is really designed to protect us and to keep us safe. And so if we can really be present to this self-doubt as a teacher, not as a, you know, it is resistance, you know, and it is something that's coming up for us to face and look at, but instead of letting the doubt stop us, which often it will, you know, I mean, how many times do we spend in that loop of questioning and second guessing ourselves when in reality the self-doubt is like when that comes up, if we can lean into it because we know we're onto something, like the self-doubt is popping up as a barrier to us really achieving the next layer or the next bit of growth. It can come in to keep us safe, to keep us in that same place of comfort and somewhat of certainty, air quotes, of course. Like nothing is ever certain, but the self-doubt, it kind of checks us, and it can be a little bit louder if we've internalized voices from the collective, from our families, from our whatever environments we're in. But if we can see that self-doubt as the normal resistance that crops up when we're getting ready to grow, to expand, to evolve, to take the next step, I think that makes it less of a barrier and more of a signpost that we're headed in at least some ballpark of the right direction. So yeah, for me, it's recognizing that everyone experiences it. Self-doubt is not something that, is just significant to me. Like everyone goes through it, and also catching myself in the spiral of self-doubt and really getting to the roots of that. Like, okay, why am I feeling this? Where is this coming from? What am I on to that I'm feeling afraid of? Like,
I love that you brought that up.
Yeah. Like where am I headed that I'm actually a little bit afraid of going? What am I avoiding feeling by feeling this resistance cropping up? What about you?
An interesting piece for me is that I started to really get to know my own self-doubt when I was grieving, like for my father. Like the first couple of years after he passed away, I was just kind of in this, shock moment. And then I found my path, and I found this like journey towards moving towards like life and living while I was alive, and looking for basically like how to make lemonade out of this big fat lemon that I was served up. I was like, because there has to be a reason. And when I for the first time in my life, I felt so certain about what I was doing. I could just like right place, right time, right moment, just felt so in alignment. And then I started really getting into my grief, like really healing it, looking at it. And I started to experience all this self-doubt. Like there was a 3-month period, maybe longer, where I was like, I'm going to quit my job and just be a bartender. Like I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like I'm not good at this. Like what am I even doing? I have a psychology degree. I can just be a bartender and just like have conversation with people while I serve them drinks. And I even inquired at a place, and they're like, well, we don't just hire bartenders, you have to be a server. And I was like, ugh. So obviously that was not the right choice for me, but it was the first time I started really getting to know my own doubt and how it was like directly linked with my grief. And so whenever I would have these big bouts of grief after I had moved through a lot, I'd be like, oh, like I would just feel all this self-doubt come in, and I'd be like, oh, hi, grief. It was like this instant awareness of like, okay, I'm in the sludge, I'm in the grief and the moment. And so for me, just recognizing that was a huge part of my own particular brand of self-doubt. Because like, I agree, we all share it, but my experience doesn't always look like anyone else's. I also would second that we are all experiencing it. It is happening for us collectively. We're not special, and that we all experience doubt. But it is my brain trying to protect myself. And depending on what scares you the most about life, what scares you the most about yourself, really. Your brain will move you away from that in order to protect you. Like, that's literally your brain's job, is to protect you. And it protects you by essentially replaying the past. So you continue to stay, because like the devil you know could be less than the devil you don't know. But it's the uncertainty that usually like sends us back away from our self-doubt. Like, oh, I'm just not going to go in that. I'm not going to bump up against that edge because it's uncertain and I don't know what is going to happen. When in reality, we never know what's going to happen. Never. And we, or at least I, played along with like this delusion that I did. You know, if I held on tight enough, if I gripped the steering wheel tight enough, I could control what was going to happen in my life. I could control the people in my life. I could control my emotional state, and I would just never have to enter any of those bad places if I just gripped. And then steadily my grip got stronger, and I started to like fulfill my own prophecy, right? Like, I started actually making happen the things that I thought I could make happen. And then at the same time, what was happening was I was very ill at ease. I was like getting sick often. I was ill at ease, like in my mind, like I just was frustrated. I was like drained. My energy was like, ugh, and I couldn't really pinpoint why, because all of the choices that I'd made to get me there were each like, I don't know, not always connected to one another. And so I found myself like kind of backed into a corner, and I didn't even know how I got there. But it's that fear of the uncertainty that pushes you. And so if we're able to like drop into our bodies, and if I'm able to really get, you know, clear in the present moment, I can recognize like, oh, hi, I see you trying to protect me. Thank you. I know you're just doing your job. You're not trying to like hurt my feelings or anything. You know, it's like, it's just that. And I love that you brought up the piece that you're like butting up against your potential. You're like butting up against something that's like actually really juicy, really great. Like that there's like a very also particular kind of fear there too, you know? So, I mean, navigating it, moving it, shifting is like really just kind of like outsmarting it sometimes. Outsmarting it, and also just moving away from the story. It's just like, I hear you. I've heard this story a million times before. Thank you. I know you're just trying to help me, but I'm going to go do this. And also reinforcing self-trust. You know, it's like you want positive reinforcement, like psychology 101, like positive reinforcement around like trusting when there's no real evidence to do so. Like, can you remember a time, like a story when you did that? When you like trusted yourself when there was like all the evidence was like, but you did it anyway and it worked out?
Yeah, and as you're speaking, what is really loud in my mind is just this. I mean, like every time I would step on stage as a dancer, you know, every single time, and when I was dancing professionally, we were performing, you know, every 2 weeks or something like that, sometimes more. You know, doubt is like a killer of your expression. And so I would learn to, because in the beginning, I was so fearful. You know, I had my own bouts with anxiety and stage fright, and especially like as I was, you know, being paid for my performance, like as my job, you know, a lot more nerves would kind of come into the picture. But I realized like through action, It's like, this is the best example that I can, really, like, from an embodied place, share from my own experience. It's taking the action and focusing all, like, in those moments. Like, so say, some performances I'd be like, yeah, I got this, I'm not really nervous about it, these are all my strengths, like, I'm performing the things that I'm good at. And then other times we'd be like, oh yeah, this, like, music is really hard to count, and I've been consistently kind of flubbing this part, or I'm supposed to be performing, this particular chain of steps, and they're not, like, my strengths. If I got into a place in my head where I was focusing on the fear and magnifying that fear, by looping over and over again, like, oh, the last time I did this, I fucked it up, or whatever, that was the absolute destroyer of expression. And so I think at some point, I didn't realize this at the time, but you just have to get over that,
Because
like,
you prove yourself right.
yes, exactly. And so it's better for your performance, so to speak, to align all of your thoughts, actions, behaviors to what it is that you want to accomplish, versus, like, letting the fear slip in. And to some degree, that's it. With dancing, there's this bodily element of training your muscle memory in order to perform, so regardless of what adrenaline, cortisol, whatever's coursing through your system biologically, like, your body is just like an animal, and that, he is trained to perform. And so I would find that, like, just that if I'm relating that to the now and my experience of life now, I'm not dancing professionally, obviously, but taking action, I think, is something that is really helpful when it comes to shifting the doubt. Like, sometimes the action is, you learn in the process of doing, like, oh, that didn't really feel right, or, oh, this felt really good. You can kind of course correct as you go, but that really only comes from taking action. In my experience, if we sit and kind of wallow in the doubt and the fear, that's not going to be as powerful, or as powerful is not the word I'm looking for, but we're not going to be able to kind of shift our state by sitting in that place and ruminating. Like, in an action can be something small. It can be, taking a walk around the block instead of sitting and crying and worrying about something. It can be, taking 3 deep breaths. It doesn't have to be anything giant, like leaving your job, although, highly recommend that if you've been getting that message over and over again, to do that. But I find that action, and also focusing on the power of your intention. And I feel like this is something that I need to hear today too, when I get stuck in places where physically, like, maybe I'm feeling a little lower energy or more emotional, it can be easy to get caught in that loop of negative thinking, or focusing on what's not working. But what is really truly empowering is to focus on our intention. Like, what would we really love to have happen in this particular area that we're stressing about? If it's money, like, is it really helping me to stress about the money that's not coming in right now because of X, Y, and Z? Or can I think about, like, what I would like to have happen? What are my intentions? And then create aligned action from that place. So I think those are sort of the things that have really helped me the most. And in terms of trusting intuition, like, I mean, again, back to my dancing career, like, I knew when it was time to leave that world. It had become too toxic. My body was giving me signs. I was really unhappy. And I was terrified to do that. I was absolutely terrified. I like, so much of my life up until the point that I decided to quit my professional job was geared towards not having to look at what was going to happen after I quit dancing. I didn't want to face that. I didn't want to face the reality of divorcing this part of myself that I loved and that I identified with so closely. And yet I knew that while this was comfortable, like, this part of my life was comfortable and uncomfortable and comfortable, it was like who I knew myself to be, even though I was tolerating a lot of toxicity and, you know, physical stuff. And, you know, there's a lot of that happening. The pull, there was like an intuitive pull. My heart was calling me somewhere else, right? Like it wasn't working anymore. And I knew that. And the fear kept me in a place for a while, you know, maybe longer than I should have stayed. But taking the leap to leave that world and do something that was more in alignment. I mean, yeah, it was the most terrifying thing I've ever done up until that point. And it's been the most fruitful, and it's helped me to realize, like, okay, I did that and I didn't die. How many other things can I face? How many other growth edges can I traverse, you know, and sort of conquer, you know, without like leaning into that place of staying stuck. Because what I realized when I trusted my heart enough to leave that world and to quit that job, it was devastating. And there was a lot of grief still I grieve that. I mean, it was my first love, you know, still I grieve that loss. And very quickly, like a couple of days after I quit the job and I didn't have to wake up and go in and feel my stomach hurt as I pulled into the parking lot of this, you know, company that I was dancing for, like, I was like, whoa, like, I didn't realize just how miserable I was until I didn't have that thing holding me down. So it's like, we get the messages. The messages are an inkling of like the full picture. So if we can follow those nuggets when we know that they're true, you know, and we each have our own way of discerning what is true. There's so much more on the other side.
Yes. You know, I resonate so deeply with that, sitting in the parking lot with a knot in your stomach. When I first moved to Charleston, I started working at a spa, and I started becoming nauseous, like while I was in massage school, because it was like, I'm an empath. And I was literally sponging everyone's energy, digesting it, and I would just be nauseous. I was nauseous all the time. And then I started learning boundaries. I started learning how to clear my field. You know, a lot of the things that I teach now, I learned out of survival. I learned because like I was so uncomfortable that I had like kind of no choice but to learn how to do this, because, you know, I wanted to like live and not be nauseous or not be in pain, or, you know, actually be alive while I'm alive. And around the time that it was time to go, it was time to leave that job, you know, I had been getting all this encouragement to start my own business. And of course I was scared shitless, because how do I do that? And who do I do that with? And who's going to show up once I do it? And I was not comfortable relying on others. I was not comfortable asking for help. I was not comfortable like letting people know, self-promotion, any of it. But I was walking into work every day. I was at work, and I would feel fine until I walked in the door, and I would get nauseous, and I would feel this knot in the pit of my stomach. And that was my signal. And even to this day, that's my signal that something is out of alignment. Like there's this knot, and I can't avoid it. Like, you know how you feel when you're nauseous. Like it takes 100% of your focus. Like, talk about being in the present moment. Pain puts you in the present moment. Nausea, discomfort puts you in the present moment. So eventually I had said, like, I have a last straw. When that happens, I'm just going to go. And like, I remember, and when that happened, I remember crying in my living room on the phone with one of my best friends at the time, who was like really pushing me to start my own business. She was like, "You will be supported." I was like, "Ooh." But I remember throwing my hands up and crying and just being like, "I surrender. Like, if this is what you want, I'll do it." I'm just like, I'm done resisting. I'm done fighting myself. I'm done like fighting my own path, fighting my own energy, you know? And So I resonate so deeply with that piece. And there was something else, which I don't know if it'll come to me, but oh, it was like action. You know, what's interesting, what I heard when you said that was you're breaking the energy. So when you're in that energy of self-doubt, and it's like, you know, the negative spiral, you're going down, going down, going down, going down, and you do something. Like you stop and take a breath, you walk out the door and take a walk, you call a friend, you turn on music, you start dancing, you breathe, you practice yoga, you run outside, take a cold shower. Like, it doesn't matter what you do, but taking an action step, just, it breaks that energetic line. And so that's what I heard when you said that, because like a lot of times, like that's all you have to do is break the cycle in order to be able to like move somewhere else other than that.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of us are more emotionally defined than others, you know, and so remembering that in the thick of feeling stuck in your head, stuck in your storylines, whatever they may be, just remembering that it doesn't take a whole lot to shift your energetic, physical, mental, emotional state. I mean, even in nutrition school, they would say, you know, one meal is enough to change everything. It's like, it just takes like the smallest thing to shift you into feeling differently, right? And then from that place, you can course correct. And so I kind of want to ask you a little bit more about, you know, we both mentioned like physical symptoms coming up, nausea, stomach aches. And one of the things that we were going to talk about today is the concept or the idea of utilizing or leveraging your body as a manifestation tool. And so I really see the mentioning of those physical symptoms as a beautiful segue into speaking about that, because I think that's part of that manifestation process. It's like really understanding, you know, the language of our bodies and what they are telling us all the time, because we can use, that's one of the ways that we can use our body as a manifestation tool. So we can dive a little bit deeper into all of that as we go, but curious to know, from your perspective, when you hear that phrase, like leveraging or using your body as a manifestation tool, what comes to mind for you?
Pleasure. You know, it's so interesting because I was watching this documentary on Netflix about magnetism, and it was about these pro athletes who basically are kind of adrenaline junkies. And so they pursue big waves, they pursue like intense skiing. Like, I didn't get through the whole documentary yet, but it was the fascinating part of what I got about magnetism. You know, manifestation has a lot to do with magnetism and being in your own magnetism, and your magnetic energy is your feeling energy. So when they're participating in these sports, like in these like big wave surfing, like they're chasing that feeling, they're chasing that euphoria, they're chasing something that they don't want to let go of, and they actually want more of. Like, there is like this addiction that can come in, but essentially, like, we all want to chase pleasure, we all want to chase feeling good, we're chasing happiness, like we're moving towards something that we really want to capture. And we think like once we capture it, like it'll just never leave us. And what was interesting was it just made me think about the magnetism of feelings, and just how when you, as like a singular,
You're getting a bunch of hearts.
I know. Good. I'm onto something. I like the hearts.
Yeah.
Like when you're in that energy of pleasure, when you're in enjoyment, when you're in that energy of like really just joy and like alignment, you become a literal magnet. You become like literally so attractive that even if you wanted people not to pay attention to you, it's impossible, because they see that thing in you that they want to capture. And so they're literally drawn towards you, especially as an entrepreneur, which like, it's hard for me not to speak as an entrepreneur because I am one. And I just kind of always have been. But like if you're someone who wants more clients in your business, like you have to find the pieces of your business that you love doing, and you have to do them, and you have to see yourself doing, and like be in that pleasure, expansion, enjoyment, and magnetism. And that is part of what makes you literally undeniable, you know. And I also, this came through because we're studying power this month in my course, Sacred Alchemy. And something that came through a couple of days ago was like just this literal idea that what you want wants you. And like, I can feel that in my body when I say it, like what I desire wants me back. You know, it's like, and you're able to add another energy to that equation. So you're amplifying your own desire, because you're also giving what you desire permission to have you, because we both, like, we want each other. We want each other. Like if I'm manifesting a man, he's manifesting me too. Like if I can't wait for him to get here, he can't wait to get here either. Like, of course, we are wanting each other. Like there are these two sides, and there's this energy of like a full body yes, and expansion within your own energy body and your own magnetic field that allows what you desire to be like literally, like it can't avoid you. It has no choice but to come for you. But I thought, you know, I love thinking about it in the energy of like sports, and like especially sports like surfing, where you're chasing that next big ride, that next adventure, that next wave. There's like, it's like they're magnetized to the earth. They're magnetized to the like sheer power of that brings them that reciprocal.
Yeah.
Because the waves just be in itself, you know?
Yeah. And you mentioned reciprocal, which is what I'm really hearing you say is this reciprocity that happens with, you know, when we're thinking about it solely from our perspective and like, I really want this thing, we're not always thinking about that like real sacred exchange that happens when we're giving, because someone is always receiving us. And, you know, giving and receiving it's just like the life cycle, you know, it's the cycle of nature. It's the cycle of our existence. And so,
and one without the other is not sustainable.
Exactly. And so when we are really in that place of reciprocity from integrity, you know, it's of assistance to receive what you want, so you can give more of what maybe someone else needs and wants, you know. So all of those examples that you mentioned, there's a way that we are co-creating our experiences together by leaning into the desires that come up for us, the things that are really like our heart's calling.
Yes. Well, you know, the other thing that came up while you were talking, I was just about to write it down, so I just like my train of thought just got crossed. But when you, so like I kind of describe everything in terms of energy. And what's beautiful about reciprocity is there's no expectation, like, and there's no like sticky energy of like desperation or need, because what happens, because our emotions are so powerful, like they're literal magnets, and magnets have two directions, right? Repel and coming together. And so when you're in that energy of like desperation and need or manipulation, or like you owe this to me, you become a repellent. Like, it's like, I'm rubber and you're glue. Nothing's going to stick, nothing's coming because there's no space for it to come. And there's also like the energetics is like total repellent. Like if you think about the energy of desperation, it's like, I'm not going anywhere near that. I don't know what you got going on, but I'm going to go far away from here.
Yeah.
And try to forget that try to forget what's happening.
And I think it's important to mention within that, like how our body can often pick up on those signals before our mind, so there may be sensations or that gut knowing that like something's off there.
Yeah. I mean, literal, like this can happen. Like you can literally be like repelled away. Like you're like, ooh.
But then
or
your
you
mind,
feel that sticky.
Yes.
Like it actually feels sticky. It's like, this is not clean. Something's not clean in here. And
yeah,
it's not clean.
And your mind may jump in and be like, but everybody else has worked with this person. And, this person has a big following, but they say that this, is going to work for me. I'm doing all of the right things. Like, why am I not receiving the results that I should be?
Or I already pursued them. Like I have to finish it.
Yeah.
Or I have to follow through, or else they'll perceive me as blah, blah, blah. It's like, the funniest part about worrying about, and believe me, I worry about what people think about me. I am not speaking from a place of, I remember those days. Yeah, I still live in those days. But like the funny thing about worrying about what people think about you is like, nobody's thinking about you. Nobody. They're thinking about themselves. This is what we do. We think about them. We think about ourselves. We think about what you're going to think about us. We think about what that person's going to think about us. We think about what everybody on social media is going to think about us if we do this, 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 and this. We think about being judged. We think about people taking love away. But we're not ever thinking about you. Like, I'm not ever thinking like, oh, like, what if this hurts Stephanie's feelings? I'm thinking about how that's going to hurt and reflect poorly on me. Like we're always like super selfish on that aspect. And at the same time, I'm totally trying to reframe that word right now, selfish.
Yeah.
Self-centered, and try to redefine it as like self-honoring, like putting myself first because it's healthy, putting myself first in the way, you put the oxygen mask on. But I've been playing with calling myself selfish and like working with the trigger there and just being like squashing it, like turning it into something like really juicy. Because we have that power, right? We can change the relationship our nervous system has with everything. And your nervous system is your energy body. So you can change your energy. And it has to be the first thing that you change. If you want anything in your outer experience to change, the energy has to shift first. Period.
And it often doesn't shift just by thinking your way out of it. I just want to presence that. So frequently we think if we just get the plan or if we just get the things right, then that's going to shift it. But the nervous system is living in your body, right? Like your nervous system is neck down.
Way smarter than you.
Yeah. So we really, we have to start working with that. We have to work with the body and the nervous system in order to shift a lot more than just like whether you feel stressed out or not.
Yes. Well, yeah, that's also something I'm playing with teaching about this month is inner influence versus outer influence, which is essentially instinct versus intellect. And then there's this book that says there's three, and of course the alliteration is excellent: instinct, intellect, intuition. So it was written by Osho, and he says that instinct lives in your body. It's like it's your autonomic nervous system. It's your unconscious brain, which is like what, 90%, 89% of your brain is unconscious. And then intellect, that's your conscious mind. And then intuition, which is the energy, he speaks to it as the energy of the heart. So it's really interesting to classify it in those terms because of where your intellect governs your instinct.
Yeah.
And like your mind, which was told to you, a belief system that may or may not even resonate with you anymore, but it's on autopilot, is trying to tell your instinct, which doesn't need to be told what to do, trying to tell it what to do. It's like, I feel like when we're tapping into our body's intuition and what it's speaking, I think it's a combination of intuition, which he would refer to as the heart, and instinct. It's like the combination of the two, the combination of the body's wisdom, and that, like, if that instinct is to like move away, it's important to at least listen to it. You may not always be may not always be able to honor it in the moment, but at least listen to it.
Yeah.
And let it know, like, I heard you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think what you mentioned too, the intellect can be shaped by so much outside of us. I mean, so much, right? And we can work with that. We can change belief systems. We can, recite mantras. But if we don't actually connect back to the heart and the instinct and use our discernment, to navigate what each of those three sources of intelligence are sharing with us, because the intellect is shaped, yes, by outside sources, childhood upbringing, collective consciousness, but that doesn't mean that there's anything bad or wrong about it. It's just, in one sense, the lens with which we viewed the world, and that can change, and it is changing a lot. But we have to recognize that there's a lot more intelligence coming to us than just through the intellect alone. And our society, our culture as a whole, has put the intellect, the wisdom of the mind, like on a pedestal above all other things. Yeah. And we're really at a point in time where we're starting to reclaim the wisdom of the heart, the wisdom of instinct, body and soul.
And that's the way forward.
100%.
It's unfortunate that to this point, so many of us as humans have been talked out of our intuition, talked out of our wisdom, talked away from our instinct, talked away from that intelligence that lives in the body, and talked into, you do it this way because you're not going to cause any ripples and you're going to stay safe and it's going to work. And right now, so many structures are breaking down, so many systems are breaking down, and no one can see the way forward because they're trying to do the same thing, which, we know that's defined as insanity, expecting. They're trying to do the same thing, and it's not working, and expecting it to work. And so it's really, I think that's what the Dalai Lama means when he says, like, the world will be saved by the Western woman. It's because the world will be saved by woman. The world will be saved by embodiment, being in the body, because the body is feminine. The body is this internal knowing. It's like the part of you that can predict the weather. Like, how many of you listening to this especially if you're in Charleston, have seen like on the news, just like plastered hurricane information. Hurricane's coming. It's going to be deadly. And you're like, no, it's not. If I keep watching the news, I might start to believe that. But my instinct is going, no, I don't feel it. And we have to start learning how to trust that. We have to start learning like that none of us really know the path forward right now. We have to start listening. Like I told my crew last night, in my course, I was like, I want you to just go 20 steps back. Like I want you to go up in the trees. Like right now you're in the grass on ground level, you can't see anything. You know, when something's like right up in your face, you can't see that it's a hand. You just see like shades of color and darkness. Like go back, go up, make some space. You don't know what to do. You don't have to know what to do. You may not know what your power is. You don't have to know what your power is. But if you go up there, you go back there and give yourself some space, you're going to see it. You're going to see it very clearly.
Zooming out. And I think to that point, I love that, you know, we need that perspective in order to honor what's growing and moving through us. And, you know, so frequently with our culture that prizes like the mind and science above everything else. And I'm not saying that those things are wrong or bad, but we, in only looking at it in this one linear way, there's right and there's wrong, you know, we're creating this binary reality. Then we start to discredit our own wisdom, you know, which may speak to us differently than, like my wisdom speaks differently to me than your wisdom speaks to you. And that doesn't make me any more right or wrong than you. It's just understanding we each have our own language, right? Like our own way of receiving the world through our senses. Like the way lavender smells to me might not be the same as lavender smells to you. Like I don't actually know what it smells like for you. So how can I say, you know, one way or the other? But in an attempt to kind of make things understandable for all of us, it's like, this is a good thing, this is a bad thing, this is the right way, this is the wrong way, instead of saying, oh, well, I know that something is true because I feel it in goosebumps, you know, on my arms, or like I know that I like this food because it, you know, tastes a certain way. I don't know, I'm just making this up, but you know what I'm saying? Like there are all of these ways that we receive information. Like the way that you and I see color is probably similar, but probably very different. The way that we hear music, and each of us has this innate creativity just by really honoring how we receive information from the world. Right? But we've been told that it's like, it's this way or it's that way. And so we're really coming back to that place of embodied understanding and awareness and creation and expression based on how we receive information in the world, and understanding our lives, our work, our purpose, whatever, through our own unique expression of life. Like that is unique to you, it's unique to me. We're each our own little work of art, but we don't always realize that because we're comparing and we're looking outside of ourselves and like, my life doesn't look the way hers does, and you know, she's better at this than I am, and whatever the things are. But we all have
which
so
also
much.
leaks your power.
Yes.
That also leaks your power. Comparison. Yes. Oh my gosh. I could totally keep going, but Instagram is going to kick us off. Like 60 seconds. But I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's here with us. Thanks for listening. Thank you for the sweet message from Sarah. She said, needed to hear this today. Love you too, both of you. Keep being magnets and save this for everyone. The world needs this right now. So yeah, that's why we're here. We're here to have conversations that we're already having, just like let you guys listen in. So thank you for listening. Thanks you for the heart.
Thanks for being here. Thank
We
you,
love
Carrie.
you.
Yeah, we love you all. It's so good to be here with all of you.
Yes.
Thank you.
So much, so much. And we will see you in what, 2 weeks? 2 weeks from today? Yeah, so we'll be here every 2 weeks.
If there's anything you'd love for us to share about, just let us know.
Reach out to us for sure.
Bye.